This is Entrepreneur Authorities. Whether you're building your brand, scaling your startup, or just getting started, get ready to be inspired, empowered, and equipped to take your next big leap. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I'm joined by Robinson Aquino. Rob is an entrepreneur, investor, and CEO of JBS. In his new book, The Small Business Money Game, Rob breaks down the hidden financial strategies that separate businesses that survive from businesses that scale. Drawing from his experience advising thousands of entrepreneurs, Rob shares lessons from growing up in his family's bodegas, building companies, and helping business owners stop guessing and start making smarter financial decisions. We're going to get into cash flow, leadership, financial literacy, and the mindset shifts required to build a business that actually lasts. Rob, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Joe?
Excellent. And we need to start this conversation talking about Monopoly. One of the games I cannot stand to play, but apparently it had a big impact in your life. And like you, I have an older brother. You had an older brother. My older brother was always better at like book stuff and math. So he always kicked my ass in games of like that required any kind of like, knowledge or smarts. I was more of like, I was more street smart so I could get around in games like that. But tell me about Monopoly and how you realized, and there's a line you actually write in the book called "Whoever controls the bank controls the game." First, I need to ask, how old were you when you came to this
That's a
revelation?
good one.
Because
So
it'd be very weird if you said to me I was 5 years old. That'd be weird, but give it to me.
yeah. No. So when I had that memory of playing with him, early 2000s, I was 10, 11 at the
Okay.
time. I certainly didn't make the connection of the person who controls the bank controls the game until high school, until my
Okay.
first economics class. There's a couple reasons why the banker usually wins in the game of Monopoly. The two I find most common is that they're either cheating and they're
Yep.
slipping bills into their pocket, or they're the person who's played the game the most. So they're kind of the host player. And it's like, oh, well, I know how this stuff works. And I think there's a lot of correlation in games and in business between people who have done things before and people who succeed well. So I love Monopoly for a number of reasons. It's the original money game. It's such an old game. It's the third best-selling game in U.S. history behind chess and checkers. I think we all have a fascination with the competitive nature of it. And something I actually didn't get into in the book much because, this concept of word count is it has a fascinating history.
Right.
Well, the history of the game was really founded by someone else who wasn't the original Charles Darrow, the founder that everyone thinks made the game. It was a woman by the name of Lizzie McGee who made something called the landlord's game in the early 1900s. And the whole point was to show how capitalism could be very bad for an economy, how concentration of land and wealth turns into a bit of a bad gig for most people, except the landowners. And it's funny how that concept turned into, where we are today. But the reason I love the game is because I think it teaches the fundamental principles of business, investing, and capital management better than just about any business school you can find.
Ah, that's great. Good stuff. Yeah, what's funny? It reminds me because I have like a monthly poker game, and we play Texas Hold'em. I'm not sure if you play poker much, but like I know all the rules, but it's always great to have one guy who's completely locked in to like the knowings of the game. Where as long as you know that person's there, there's like almost like a safety net. So like the Monopoly banker's like there to keep everyone honest. And obviously you mentioned point one of the cheating aspect of it, but like having that person and I think that word control is almost like you can say Sherpa or guide. You almost always need that kind of person to make things work. And obviously you saw that in Monopoly and even in like your day to day and the business that you built over there. This idea of there's someone has to be constantly with their eye on the prize at all time.
Well, think about what banks do when they moderate an economy. And banks, in my mind, start with central banks and go all the way to retail banks. You need someone to keep an eye on the flow of capital. In a business, which is a setting I'm usually in, you need someone, a CFO, a staff accountant, a controller, to keep an eye on things like gross profit margins and net profit margins, because it's very easy in business to get lost. And a lot of people, you were mentioning, Joe, that your brother, he was better at math than you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to money management, what we're talking about here is addition, subtraction, right? We're not talking about very complicated math. I think that's something that I see people tell themselves often, where it's like, well, I'm not very good at math, so I'm not very good at managing money. It's like, well, no one's asking you to do calculus. We just have to manage a budget that has a surplus. And you'd be surprised, just because I think the fear of numbers or the emotional tie that people have with money or the history people have with money, just how often they avoid the calculation, and just how complicated it can get at times.
And not only the complication, the intimidation factor. So we both come from immigrant families. You're from the DR. My family's from Spain and Cuba. And there's something intimidating about money. And I don't know if it's the immigrant part of me that's ingrained in my DNA of like, I always joke with people, Robinson, that I've always had a fear more of being homeless than cancer. Like again, this is like the immigrant mentality of like, it's the scarcity mentality of like, is there ever enough money? How did that fit with your upbringing? Because out of curiosity, because I know speaking, growing up with a Latin American kids, they kind of had the same feeling I did, the hustle and grind, outwork everybody, do what you got to do to support your family. How did that jive with the idea of like you being in, in love with
Yeah.
money, for a lack of a better word? Tell
Yeah,
me
yeah.
about that intersection.
Yeah, so I grew up very similar to you. My parents immigrated when they were teenagers, and they had a very rough go at it in the beginning. I think a lot of us, we learn money from a very finite place. So, there's not enough to go around. We have
Right.
to take more of what we have. We have to be very diligent with how we spend it because we don't know how much is coming if an emergency happens. And the way that I was able to get over, it took me a very long time. What I know is the fear of poverty, like this in underlying fear of what happens if I don't have enough, what happens if I lose it all, what happens if I lose my job. Funny enough, it was through education, through realizing just how much money is out there in existence. There's trillions of dollars. I don't think people really even know what trillions is compared to billions and millions. But there's just so much money out there in the world, that I think that once you understand where it is and how it's organized, and fundamentally how banking works, which back to Monopoly, it's amazing how much you can learn from a game like that on how fractional reserve banking and central banking works today. But the more I was able to learn about how money gets generated, how entrepreneurs earn money, because I think those are naturally the people who have the most of it, how money flows to assets, and how really the game of money that we're playing, to Monopoly's point, is not an income game, it is a game of assets. I think I started to realize soon, okay, well, the sequence that I have to go through is first understanding how money gets earned, and it gets earned through skills. So what skills can I work towards? How can I upskill? And then once you earn it, how money is kept, and it gets kept via surpluses. Like genuinely speaking, Joe, make sure that you earn more than you spend, no matter
Right.
what your situation looks like. And then beyond that sequence, it gets made through investing. And investing can start very small, very simple, index funds. But as it evolves, it turns into, well, let me try to start this business or help someone else start this business. And then the master level players that I've seen, typically across equity, so businesses and real estate, where most of the money is held, are the people who go through this crazy, crazy journey of entrepreneurship and make 1,000 mistakes and then realize how a business gets built. Because once you do it right once, it's not that hard to replicate. And as you go through that sequence of like learning to scale, to earn, to save, to invest, to building businesses, that has a direct correlation to how wealth moves.
Speaking of entrepreneurship and building businesses, tying it to our immigrant backgrounds, my mom was always like, just do a job that you love and you're nice to people. That was like her thing. But if I told her I was going to be an entrepreneur, she would have probably had me committed. Had a 5150 hold. What was your family vibe like when you told them that you were going down this path? Because you were on the track to be like, hey, I'm gonna work for the man. The
Yeah.
pardon the expression, again, our backgrounds would suggest is like, hey, work hard and you're gonna provide your family, and then someone every 2 weeks is gonna give you a check. How did that jibe with your upbringing, your family, that you were gonna go on this entrepreneurial journey?
So my mom was an entrepreneur, not by design, but by default. It
Okay.
was like for her, it was like, well, I need to do this because I need a way to earn well enough to take care of my children and be able, she was a single parent. So be able to be there for us when she needed to without having to worry about whether or not she was going to be able to keep her job. So when I first approached her with the idea my senior year of college, like, hey, I'm going to go try to start my own financial planning practice. And we spent all this time and energy getting me here. And now I'm going to go get a job that's 100% commission. She was like, please don't do that. And, and, uh, I won her over by saying, well, if I'm ever going to take any risks, now's the time, right? Because I could just go get a job after. And so I think for her, she had worked so hard to get me into the steady paycheck, into the career ladder, that she just was really disappointed initially. Um, and then she saw why I was doing it. So I went down the wealth management path really as a way to learn more about the ecosystem of money, of how people manage money at a high level, just so I can come and teach it back to my family. And then it was like, well, what's the worst case? It's just an internship. I ended up crushing it during my internship and then decided to go full time. And really because I just wanted to continue to learn how the world worked, how the world of the 1%ers and the 10%ers worked. And the more time I spent in there, the more fascinated I got by it. But you mentioned something that I love, Scott Galloway. Every time people say anything like pursue your passion, he always says that's such a load of nonsense because
Yeah.
only rich people can pursue their passions.
Yeah.
Like you need to have resources to go pursue your passion. So his philosophy is build wealth first and then go do what you love.
Yeah, it's funny, I often say, and this is not some sort of groundbreaking idea, that like our generations keep getting softer, right? And it's just because your mom had a tough time, my parents had a tough time. So the last thing they want to do is like, hey, we worked our asses off so you wouldn't have a hard time. So my dad was always into manual labor. He's a machinist. My mom worked in offices. She was like, the last thing I want you to do is do what we had to do and work so hard. So there is that idea of like parents want to make it easy. And then obviously there are some negative effects with that when you make it too easy for children. We're not going to go there. But in the book, there was this great story about your mom and the chicken drumstick.
Yeah.
Could you share that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, I think I was about 10-ish at the time. We had moved from New York to Lawrence, Massachusetts when I was about age 10. And so that was a big shift for me. Actually, it was a few years after that. My mom had this old school analog calculator that she took everywhere with her. So she had one at the bodega in the business, one at home. And I just see her like ripping through papers and crunching these numbers into the calculator. And I'm like, what's she doing now? And then she was so excited. She said, son, come over here. I have to show you this. My mom is not a techie. So like now we use Excel virtually for everything. Soon, I'm sure that'll go away too.
Right.
My mom's version of Excel, do you remember the old composition notebooks, the like black and white ones? So she
Absolutely. Yeah.
used to buy those and with a ruler make her own spreadsheets. And then at the top, like have the dates. And that's where she used to keep her daily sales and daily cost. Wild. She still does. And she has she has her spreadsheet open and she's showing me a purchase order. And she had just brought cases and cases of drumsticks. And on the calculator read 0.007. And I was like, what are you showing me, Ma? And she's like, this is how much it costs. You see those cases over there. This is how much each drumstick is costing me. Just under a penny, 70 cents of 70% of a penny. She said, I'm going to season these drumsticks and I'm going to fry them and I'm going to sell them for $1 a piece. And I'm going to make 99, 0.3% profit. And the excitement in her eyes, as if she just like invented a new molecule. I will never forget it. And at the time I just thought, oh, my mom really knows how to make money. And she just has such a genuine character about her because not only was she seeing the ability to make money, but also the ability to provide a reasonable, affordable meal for people who are on their lunch breaks. And I think for her, it was the fact that she was able to do both is what really brought out magic. And it's one of the earliest moments of entrepreneurship. Shortly after that, I started selling some food in middle school that I wasn't supposed to be doing and thinking, well, I can do that too. And I'll just never forget it, especially later on thinking about how important it is to have healthy gross margins, like understanding the things you buy and what you sell it for fundamentally shape the kind of business you can build.
That's great stuff, and obviously your mother was very inspiring to you, and it has an inspiring tale to be told. But, it's funny, there is this idea about the entrepreneur's instinct, and your mother certainly had that in spades, and the fact that she didn't have an MBA or was educated in business and all this other stuff, but you did.
Mm.
What do you see as the differences between sort of like the born entrepreneur and sort of the made entrepreneur, or is there not? Do you think someone could be born an entrepreneur or not born or become an entrepreneur? What's your thoughts on it from seeing both sides of it? From seeing the
Yeah.
side of someone doing it from literally the ground up with using composition books instead of
Yeah.
spreadsheets to now like highfalutin classes and MBA programs and AI and all the other jazz.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think for the most part, most entrepreneurs are naturally born that way. I think there's a certain way that their brains are wired, to look for opportunity, to look for difficulty, to naturally gravitate towards resistance as opposed to ease. I think there's a lot of personality traits that we see amongst entrepreneurs. But actually, something I'd love to talk to you about, Joe. I think that some people make incredible entrepreneurs that are creatives, that are like getting businesses off of the ground, and they just love that. And then I think other people are naturally operators. They're not very good in the beginning, but once there is some semblance of a business, they are very good at building organization around that business. And I think there are a few rare cases where you'll see an entrepreneur operator who loves to do both. But my aunt and my mom were the perfect couple because my aunt really loved getting a business off of the ground, like building it, getting the inventory in, servicing the clients. Like I would say essentially the first 3 to 12 months was just the stuff that she lived for. And then once she got it so dialed in that it was the same mundane task over and over, I think she hated it.
Right.
And that's where my mom came in. Like, wait, there's actually something here. We need to organize it better. We need to see if we can grow it a little bit better. Can we double daily sales? And they just made such a 1-2 punch. The natural entrepreneur and then a natural operator, uh, that it taught me so much. I don't know if you know Gino Wickman. He
No.
wrote Traction. He wrote Rocket Fuel. He talks about the innovator and the integrator,
Sure.
and kind of like the same concept. And so I do think entrepreneurs, there are people who are naturally born for it. But then I also think that it can be a learned behavior. And most of us learn it via operators, not necessarily getting it off the ground, but then taking a proof of concept that works and scaling it up.
That's great. I do think of all things, either entrepreneurs made or born. I think the one thing that is kind of common for both is risk tolerance. Like if you don't have a tolerance for risk, no matter if you were born an entrepreneur or made an entrepreneur, you're just not made for it. So tell me about this idea of risk tolerance and risk calculus, all the other cool phrases they've come up with these
Yeah,
days
yeah,
for
yeah.
entrepreneurs. But this idea of risk and fear of and removing the fear of failure.
Um, to simplify things, I think one of my favorite things to do in finance is take all these really fancy words that we've created and just bring it down to common sense, which is what most of us really need. I think sometimes, Joe, a lot of those fancy words are created as a barrier to say, like, well, I know more than you, and so you should hire me.
Right.
I've worked with a lot of advisors. Um, and so risk tolerance, I think, comes down to a simple fact of comfort. There are some people that they like to be able to predict what's going to come next. They value predictability, consistency above all. And then there are some people who, if you gave them that, will pinch themselves just to feel something. And the people who I think have a high correlation to risk tolerance are those who have to naturally see where their limits are. Like, what more can I do? How much more can I grow? I think there are people whose amygdala naturally leads to fight as opposed to flight.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are procrastinators. So they like to see what's going to happen when their back is against the wall. They like to turn in that paper an hour or a couple minutes before the deadline. Um, and so I think the people who are just always fascinated with how much more they have to learn, how much more they can grow, are the people who naturally take more risk. And what I think everyone comes to find at end of life, I've done a lot of retirement planning, so I've worked with a lot of people post their careers. I think they all end up realizing that risk was kind of this made up thing, this made up veil, um, that every time they actually took risk, that bad things generally didn't happen. And even when they did, there was always some sort of other outcome. And a lot of people, especially in their 70s and 80s, have told me, the only real risk is having something that you wanted to chase and not going for it. Um, and so, naturally speaking, I just think that the people who constantly obsess about personal growth are the people who take a lot more risk. And the people who are comfortable and appreciate predictability are those who are less likely to.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a little bit of your career before we get into what you're doing today. But
Hmm.
you talk about being a financial advisor. I think you spent 7 years as a FINRA registered financial
Yeah.
advisor, worked with tons of people across all different economic levels. Was there a conversation or maybe some point during that changed your perspective on wealth the most? Was there something that finally hit you that kind of led you to where you are today, where you're like, oh, that's how that works?
Hmm.
Or, oh, no one told me that
Hmm.
before.
That's a great question. I think, yes, I think studying economic booms and bust was the big thing for me. Uh, Money's flowed via central banks. In Monopoly, there's this phenomenal rule, Joe, that if the bank runs out of money, that can't happen. And so what you should do is you're instructed to go get pieces of paper and cut them up and write down whatever bills you need. And it's wild to me that Monopoly was created in the 30s, technically early 1900s, and it wasn't until 2008 that we discovered this thing called quantitative easing, where if we're short on money supply, we could just print more. And so the thing to know is how money flows. It typically comes from the central bank to other partner banks and US governments. And so then you should think about, well, what does the bank do with money once they have it? They lend it. And what do they lend it for? Banks only lend money for one thing, it's to develop assets. What does the government use money for? Stimulus, typically. They like to create jobs, they like to create infrastructure. And so you realize money only really flows to businesses and to real estate. And people wonder, why we have such wealth gaps. I think there's a number of reasons, but one of the structural reasons is that the way the money currently flows and has for 100 plus years is via economic development in businesses and in real estate. And so naturally, the people who own businesses and real estate own most of the money. Um, that was a big eye opener for me. Like when I learned that you go deposit your money at the bank and that they only really normally keep about 10 cents of every dollar you put in, and then they put the rest to work in assets, it kind of makes sense relatively quickly why the people who own assets build wealth over time. Because as more money flows into these assets, the assets will appreciate. And same goes for Monopoly, right? It's like if you're just rolling the dice, going around the board, collecting your 200 bucks, not buying anything, what's the inevitable outcome?
Get lost.
Yep.
And it's funny too, Rob, I will say, I will never wanna play Monopoly with you because you would seriously kick my ass. So,
But
that's never gonna happen. We're never gonna play Monopoly together. Is your family like that too at this point where you're like, "No, no, no, Rob can't play Monopoly with us."
no,
Do you have to go on, like, Craigslist and find people to play Monopoly with?
what's funny? I haven't played in a while now. Have a board game. I have like an original board, and I'm going to be playing with my daughter soon, who's 5, because I can't wait to teach her the game. But Joe, Monopoly is a game of luck, right? It's interesting to hear you approach it that way, and it's interesting how we all kind of approach games because I could be very good at the game. We're still rolling dice, man. What's to say that I'm going to beat you? Um, I think ultimately what we need to realize, like in the game, like in life, that luck has a lot to do with it. Uh, and that of course you have to make certain decisions once you get lucky. You have to understand certain patterns, but there's no telling that I'm going to win every time.
I don't
Because
know. I'll be rolling, Rob, and I'll try to get to Park Avenue and those blue squares quicker so I can charge the rent out of you. That's about the only way I think I could beat you, Rob. And you mentioned your daughter. There was a line in the book where I think your four-year-old asked you, "Dad, what number can you count up to?"
Mm.
Why did that simple question hit you so hard?
Because I think that the human mind is very bad at calculating. We're very good at comparing. We're very bad at calculating. I think it's what scares people with money in general. Uh, there's something called the law of large numbers, and it applies to a lot of different areas. And in this specific case, is like our minds are just not equipped to deal with something like a $30 trillion deficit. Like to most of us, we don't even know what that means. And actually, after she asked me that question, I thought about like, well, how if I counted now for the rest of my life, what number could I even get to? And the number is really, really small. If you, I put the exercise in the book. If you count to 1 million seconds, do you know how long that would take, roughly, Joe? Take a wild guess.
Rob, you're asking the bad math guy here. I don't know,
Take,
2 hours. I don't know.
so it's about 11 days,
Oh, geez.
right? So,
You
but
see you see
but
how
that's the
bad
thing.
you see how bad at math I
But that's all of us. That's all of us, right? None of us are equipped to do that kind of math that quickly in our heads. And it's interesting the gravity at which we'll think about these kind of numbers. Because if you then think about 1 billion seconds, right? 100x more. That's 31 years. So the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is about less than 2 weeks to about 31 years, about my age now. And if you look at a trillion, it's 31,000 years. So there's so much money out there in existence. Uh, and then it's really sad to see that of all the global wealth in the US, 50% of the population owns about 2.5%. And it's the systemic nature of the game that money flows to assets, and most people don't own assets. And so, yeah, what a weird, what a weird exercise I had after being in Costco with my daughter, and she was probably asking for 100, 200, and of course I went home later, opened up Excel, and I was like, oh man, this is such a larger problem at play. So I think the more comfortable we can get, particularly entrepreneurs can get with numbers, I think the more comfortable they can get with their own.
That's great. I know a lot of people don't agree when I say this, but I feel like, that, capitalism is the best ism. Like all the other isms, communism, socialism, we've seen they don't work that great. Um, but I often say, and people think I'm an idiot when I say this, is like when the forefathers and the founding fathers decided to push for capitalism, I don't think they ever realized how rich people would be. I don't think
Mm,
in their wildest dreams they could imagine the amount of money. The fact that within 250 years of the founding of the country, there's a trillionaire. Like,
yeah.
I don't so that's where I always push back on capitalism, like people saying it's the best we got, which is I know it is, but
Yeah.
like I think when it was created, I don't think it was created for people to get this rich. I just don't think they could have imagined it ever getting this big. I know it's kind of weird to think, but I think that's the flaw in capitalism, that it was born from a place of they had no idea where this was going.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's weird to think at all. First, the best way that I've ever thought about this exercise, and unfortunately I can't remember who I heard it from, is that communism is very good in your household, and socialism is very good in your neighborhood, but only capitalism works at a global scale. Um, and I think we all want our children and the people in our house to have equal outcome of resources, and we all want our neighbors to be doing fairly well. And once you think about someone on the other side of the earth, I think that just doesn't come as natural to us. I think we need a better system of organization. But I think you're spot on with the fact that when capitalism was invented, I think about this often, Joe. So I'm happy you asked this question. When it was invented, we're talking about pre-industrial revolution. We're talking about agriculture, typically done by human labor as the means of production. And so, of course, there was never the ability to scale. Like our ability to scale was how many seeds do we have? How fertile is the land? How many people could possibly work on the land? And how are we distributing land today? Like that was it. And the capitalism that we know today was born from the industrial revolution, right? Where all of a sudden we learned how to create widgets. We understood that by focusing skilled labor on making a specific part in a factory, and in many ways kind of taking a bit of humanity out of work and getting into more of a cog workforce, we became much, much more productive. And I think that that's continued forward into banking, into healthcare, into technology, where we can concentrate more like systematic labor together with technology and capital to create powerhouses. I think with artificial intelligence now, we're only going to see that scale up even more. And the good news is, Joe, that us humans, whether it be countries or individuals, we tend to change when the pain is high enough to change, when there's incentive enough to change. And so, what I think will come from all of this over the next decade or two will be a new form of capitalism, a capitalism that has to work for today with smaller companies, with much more competition, and with incumbents not being able to create the moats that they can create now because more people will have access.
That's good. I love that. I mean, I am of the ilk of the Rutger Bregmans, the economic historians. Of I think eventually we're going to probably need a universal basic income,
Yeah.
because if all of this comes to fruition, what these AI oligarchs are bringing
Yeah.
forth, it means there's not going to be a lot of jobs left.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to find a way. We're not going to delve into this
Mm.
here because we've all
Yeah,
gone in
sure.
different directions. But I
Sure.
definitely feel like if that's where we're heading, like you said, like this change due to pain, I think that's like the only fix. Like otherwise, there's just going to be a lot of starving people out there, and I don't think
Mm.
anybody wants to see that. So,
Mm.
but let's start to wrap things up and more of a positive note. Took a dark turn there.
I actually think we're going to go really positive with all of
Okay.
this. Remember that commerce exists, business exists only to solve human needs and human issues. And so as we create more needs and issues, I think we'll just create much different businesses than we see today.
No, that's good. And I will say, it's kind of, I guess it's maybe part of like the human survival instinct. And I don't know if you're seeing this too, Rob, is like this AI backlash that when people immediately see something that's AI, they're like, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, I
Yeah.
don't like that. Like, whether it's AI generated video,
Mm.
pictures, now workforces, like I think it's off-putting to people. So I
Mm.
think that's the one thing that these AI people are gonna have to do going forward is like try to try to, like the entrepreneurs, tell a story that will,
Yeah.
I don't think AI has that story like sort of mapped out yet that's appealing
Yeah.
to people. So that's something they have to work on. So, but let's speak on what you're working on today. And you
Mm.
made this move to JBS. Let's sort of like wind things down by talking about, what you're doing at JBS, how you ended up there. Like give me that quick little thumbnail story about that, because I want to talk about the work you're doing with small businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. JBS is my family's tax and accounting firm. My stepfather and my brother, of course, together with my mom's entrepreneurial spirit, started this business in '05. And it was really just like a neighborhood tax practice. So, just kind of how you would go to your franchise H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt. There's all over the country a lot of independent firms, a lot of them family owned, first, second generation tax people working with their communities to get tax returns done. And we've been doing that for a very long time. COVID actually was what drove me to JBS full time. When the pandemic hit and everybody was forced to close their business, Joe, the government said, well, we have relief efforts for you guys. All you have to do is fill out these applications. And number one, if you can imagine, a lot of these micro business owners, particularly those who didn't speak English primarily, were very confused as to how to fill out these applications. Not to mention, the applications needed your tax returns, your proof of extension for the year, and your financial statements attached to it. And most micro businesses owners don't know what financial statements even are, especially if you're under like a $500,000 in revenue. So what actually happened is I paused my financial planning practice to go help my brother build a bookkeeping arm to the business so that he could help support these few hundred business owners who needed to get these relief. Um, Long story short, I saw this massive need for accounting data, not just amongst the micro business owners, but people with 50, 100, 200 employees who didn't have proper access to what I call business intelligence. Because I think if your accounting reports are done well and written by people and analyzed by people who understand business, it becomes intelligence for you to make decisions. Um, and that led us to build out the accounting arm. So I came here as a CFO to build out the accounting arm that 5 years later now represents 40% of our business. And what I get to do every day, Joe, is I get to work with entrepreneurs who absolutely love what they do. And I get to guide them on how to scale and grow their business so that they feel like they have a decision partner that speaks the language of banking, the language of insurance, the language of tax and accounting.
I love that, and, I said I mentioned in the open that your belief is that small businesses don't fail because of bad ideas, they fail because they never built the financial systems needed to grow. I mean, how I'm trying to imagine a world where there aren't people like
Mm,
GPS. Like,
mm.
what would happen? Because we all know that most of the times when businesses fail, it's not because of a bad product. It's because either self-induced, something they don't know, like the games,
Yeah,
for lack of a better word, that need
yeah.
to be played behind the scenes. Tell me how, maybe it's anecdotal. Tell me how the work you're doing at JBS has helped someone who, if you weren't there, would probably not be there today.
Hmm. So to answer your first question, what happens is what's happening and what's always happened. We see failure rates at 67 to 90%, depending on the industry. There's no reason why 90% of businesses should be failing within 10 years, especially if they're not like tech startups and they're trying to do something massive, but they got crushed by someone else. We're talking about doctors' offices and barber shops. There's no reason that if there's people who like the service and want to pay them money for it, that those businesses should be failing at such high rates. And so I think money management doesn't come natural to people. I think it's certainly a learned skill. I think of some of my clients who have these really tough decisions to make. Uh, Questions, my sister-in-law is recently negotiating her salary and she comes to me for support and I have to give her the firm's side of it. I do a lot of CFO work on the healthcare side. So I have to give her, well, your company is thinking about your specific position. They're thinking about all the other people that sit in your position too. How much those individuals are being paid relative to how much they can't just say, yes, we actually love you and we would love to pay you more money than you currently earn. They have to think about how those decisions then ripple across the entire company, and when you're doing something as complicated as compensation design, you need to be meaningfully fair. You need to understand how to do historical analysis to find out where people are coming from. You need to understand, especially in the healthcare sector, where you don't control your price, what your providers are doing and predict what your providers are going to do because the health insurance companies determine how much you make, not you. And based on that determination, you need to pay your people enough to keep them, but also to keep the business alive. And these are just things that a healthcare professional doesn't want to think about and is not properly equipped to answer this question. So, what often happens, especially when I come in midway and someone's already in trouble, is I get there and people in the same position are paid all sorts of different things. And some people, once you run the math on what they bill versus what they make, are not making the business any money. They're costing the business money. And once you're in a position like that, Joe, it's a very hard thing to come back from. So I consider myself at JBS and our partners here decision partners for a lot of these small businesses because at the end of the day, there's going to be things that you have to do, like hiring, and there's never the right time to hire. There's only the risk of hiring and trying to calculate, well, what does it look like if it works? And what does it look like if it doesn't work? And what could we reasonably afford today? And how do we put benchmarks in place so that we know 30 days, 90 days, 180 days from now, whether this was a good idea or not? That's the accountability that people are looking for. And naturally, in large companies, there are swarms of teams who do just this. But in micro businesses, there's typically not even one person to support.
Wow. It's crazy, and, I don't know if you can you provide services to the hospitality industry, but I'm based in Charleston, South Carolina, and I don't know what it is, but and this is not hyperbole, I feel like a restaurant is closing every week, and so, again, we're recording this in the middle of 2026,
Yeah.
I don't need to state
Yeah.
the economic pressures and stuff, but what do you think is happening? And I just randomly picked, hospitality, what is happening with these businesses now? Because where you mentioned that failure rate. I feel like that failure rate is getting higher and higher by the day. What do you think? Is it more of just like that internal stuff, the bookkeeping, the payments, all of that budgeting, all of that stuff? Is that still the driver and it's just being extrapolated because of these economic pressures?
Yeah, so hospitality has one of the higher failure rates. And it's for a couple of reasons. I think naturally it has a lower barrier to entry. So a lot more people can go into it.
Sure.
And if too many people open up in the same block for the same customers, naturally some are going to fail. So in the book, I have this focus on the three core cost levers. So it's labor, it's facilities, and it's inventory. And, I run an accounting firm. And the only real cost I have, I think real, like absorbs more than 10% of my income, is labor, right? We're selling intellectual property, we're selling professional services. The challenge with hospitality businesses, Joe, is they carry all three. So not every business is built the same. When you have a labor force, front of house and back of house, that you have to manage, and you have inventory that you have to buy weekly because it spoils, and you have facilities, you have to build out full kitchens and you have to build out nice concepts, you're already starting from a cost perspective with a business that has very thin margins. And then when we look at the customer side, right, you're dealing with individuals who are cost conscious, right, who see dining out as a luxury. And when their income does things that they don't expect it to do, when we see increase in unemployment, when we see increased debt, naturally they have to cut somewhere, and discretionary spending is one of the first places to go. And so the hospitality business is one of the hardest businesses to be in because you have razor thin margins. Just to get off the ground, you have to do incredible build outs. It requires really diligent labor and inventory management. And then there's so much competition, particularly from people who are never going to win to begin with, but can disrupt your business. And, one of the most important things I think people should understand is every business, every industry is fundamentally different in the way that it delivers its service. And I have partners, one of our core partners here, CPA at JBS, is a hospitality expert. And you should see what he can do with the analysis of a plate cost to determine whether or not a business is going to survive.
Wow.
So there are just some businesses where you cannot afford to make certain errors.
Interesting. That's great. Thanks for the quick little education. I feel like I just took an MBA class with you. I love it.
Yeah.
It's all right. So let's wrap things up, Robinson, with after reading your book, getting to know you, chatting with you today, there seems to be this thorough line of family legacy, and that providing your starting point doesn't define your future. Like just where you began, where your mom began, it didn't define who you would become. When did you truly believe that for yourself? Like the same as your mother, regardless of what she went through, I think she had a couple bankruptcies along the way
Yeah.
and still made it out on the other side. Your family business. When did you truly believe that it doesn't matter where you start, but where you're heading?
To me, that's such an easy answer because it was all my mom. I had that fundamental philosophy instilled in me by the time I was 12, not from what she told me, but just from what I saw. I saw her go through so many difficult moments. I saw her think about quitting and then look at us and essentially convince herself that she had no other option. And I saw that willpower and that motivation. And I realized that, one of the most powerful things I like to say in this game, in this money game that we're all playing, there's only two ways to lose, and it's to quit or to run out of cash. And as long as you don't quit, and as long as you know how to go get the next, pay cycle of income, whether it be weekly, monthly, there's no losing, right? And so the biggest opponent that I think we're all playing is the person in our own head. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can start succeeding. Every client that I've worked with since then has only solidified that idea for me.
I love it. You can read more about it in the book, The Small Business Money Game. He is Robinson Aquino, partner and chief executive officer at JBS. Rob, I'm looking forward to our continued conversations. I'm going to see you next time on Entrepreneur Authorities, but thanks for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Appreciate it, man.
And that'll do it for this episode. If you're an entrepreneur ready to grow your industry recognition as an author and entrepreneur.com contributor, go to authorities.entrepreneur.com.